Happy Storytelling. Today we are going to be reading a story, but first off we are going to be reading the Bible, then we are going to be doing steps, then we are going to be reading Fellowship of the Ring. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell not miss another video. Here's my dad to read the Bible, and we will be following along in our Bibles. Let's do this.
Hello. This is 1 Samuel chapter 9. This is the English Standard Version of the Holy Scripture. Kimmy, are you ready? Perfect! All right, so let me go ahead and begin. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward he was taller than any of the people. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So Kish said to Saul his son, "Take one of the young men with you, and arise, go and look for the donkeys." And he passed through the hill country of Ephraim, and passed through the land of Shalisha, but they did not find them. And they passed through the land of Salim, but they were not there. Then they passed through the land of Benjamin, but did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come, let us go back, lest my father cease to care about the donkeys, and become anxious about us." But he said to him, "Behold, there is a man of God in this city, and he is a man who is held in honor. All that he says comes true. So now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us the way we should go." Then Saul said to his servant, "But if we go, what can we bring the man? For the bread in our sacks is gone, and there is no present to bring to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant answered Saul again, "Here I have with me 1/4 of a shekel of silver, and I will give it to the man of God to tell us our way." Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he said, "Come, let us go to the seer," for today's prophet was formerly called a seer. And Saul said to his servant, "Well said. Come, let us go." So they went to the city where the man of God was. And they went up the hill to the city. They met young women coming out to draw water, and said to them, "Is the seer here?" They answered, "He is. Behold, he is just ahead of you. Hurry, he has come just now to the city, because the people have a sacrifice today on the high place. As soon as you enter the city, you will find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat till he comes, since he must bless the sacrifice afterward. Those who are invited will eat. Now go up, for you will meet him immediately." So they went up to the city. As they were entering the city, they saw Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, "Tomorrow about this time I will send to you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him to be prince over my people Israel. He shall save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have seen my people, because their cry has come to me." When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, "Here is the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who shall restrain my people." Then Saul approached Samuel in the gate and said, "Tell me, where is the house of the seer?" Samuel answered Saul, "I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me. And in the morning I will let you go and will tell you all that is on your mind. As for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not set your mind on them, for they have been found, and for whom is all that is desirable in Israel. Is it not for you and for all your father's house?" Saul answered, "Am I not a Benjaminite, from the least of the tribes of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way?" Then Samuel took Saul and his young men and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, who were about 30 persons. And Samuel said to the cook, "Bring the portion I gave you, of which I said to you, put it aside." So the cook took up the leg and what was on it, and set them before Saul. And Samuel said, "See, what was kept is set before you. Eat, because it was kept for you until the hour appointed, that you might eat with the guests." So Saul ate with Samuel that day, and when they came down from the high place into the city, a bed was spread for Saul on the roof, and he lay down to sleep. Then at the break of dawn Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Up, that I may send you on your way." So Saul arose, and both he and Samuel went out into the street. As they were going down to the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to pass on before us, and when he has passed on, stop here yourself for a while, that I may make known to you the word of God." And that is the end of the reading, and I hope God is blessing you with that reading of Scripture, telling us about who Saul was before he was made king, and how Samuel found him. Alrighty, so in the last little segment of a chapter that we read yesterday, they left Weathertop and they were going through troll country, and the trolls came out, attacked them, and ate them, and that was the end of the story. And that's it. All right, so now Kimberly's going to tell you what really happened, and here she is.
Honestly, Dad, stop killing off all the characters. So, Frodo, in the chapter before last, or half chapter, the chapter before the last half chapter, he got hurt by one of the Black Riders, and this it was like a poison blade or something like that. So he's suffering from the poison, and they were going through about this area.
I don't think they can see that.
But they're actually pretty close to the mountains, actually.
They're getting closer, aren't they?
Yeah. So they are pretty close to the mountains, and so the thing is, they're actually in the area, like Frodo, he noticed that they're in the area that Bilbo defeated the trolls in with the help of the dwarves.
But they don't know that.
No, Frodo said. He was like thinking that or something. And so they found this troll hole, I guess. And they're going to, they had investigated it, and it was actually very old. Well, it was fairly old, I guess. And right now, I think it was like Sam or Mary found a few trolls, and right now they're going to investigate them, and I know exactly what they're going to see. I'm going to hand it off to Dad.
You're not going to tell us? Oh no!
Of course not.
I know
It's spoiling.
I know exactly what they're going to see.
Alrighty, so we are in the middle of the last chapter, Flight to the Ford, and let us just keep going now. The sun was now high, and it shone down through the half-stripped branches of the trees, and lit the clearing with bright patches of light. They halted suddenly on the edge, and peered through the tree trunks, holding their breath. There stood the trolls, 3 large trolls. One was stooping, and the other 2 stood staring at him. Strider walked forward unconcernedly. "Get up, old stone," he said, and broke his stick upon the stooping troll. Are you going to sit down? Nothing happened. There was a gasp of astonishment from the hobbits, and then even Frodo laughed. "Well," he said, "we are forgetting our family history. These must be the very 3 that were caught by Gandalf quarreling over the right way to cook 13 dwarves and 1 hobbit." "I had no idea we were anywhere near the place," said Pippin. He knew the story well. Bilbo and Frodo had told it often, but as a matter of fact he had never more than half believed it. Even now he looked at the stone trolls with suspicion, wondering if some magic might not suddenly bring them to life again. "You are forgetting not only your own family history, but all you have ever known about trolls," said Strider. "It is broad daylight, with a bright sun, and yet you come back trying to scare me with a tale of live trolls waiting for us in this glade. In any case, you might have noticed that one of them has an old bird's nest behind his ear. That should be a most unusual ornament for a live troll." They all laughed. Frodo felt his spirits reviving. The remainder of Bilbo's first successful adventure was heartening. The sun, too, was warm and comforting, and the mist before his eyes seemed to be lifting a little. They rested for some time in the glade and took their midday meal right under the shadow of the trolls' large legs. "Won't somebody give us a bit of a song while the sun is high?" said Merry, when they had finished. "We haven't had a song or a tale for days." "Not since Weathertop," said Frodo. The others looked at him. "Don't worry about me," he added. "I feel much better, but I don't think I could sing. Perhaps Sam could dig something out of his memory." "Come on, Sam," said Merry. "There's more stored in your head than you let on about." "I don't know about that," said Sam, "but how would this suit? It ain't what I call proper poetry, if you understand me. Just a bit of nonsense. But these old images here brought it to mind." Standing up with his hands behind his back, as if he was at school, he began to sing to an old tune. "Troll sat alone on the seat of stone, and munched and mumbled a bare old bone. For many a year he had gnawed it near, for meat was hard to come by, done by, gum by. In a cave in the hills he dwelt alone, and meat was hard to come by. Up came Tom with his big boots on. Said he to the troll, 'Pray, what is yon? For it looks like the shin o' my nuncle Tim, as should be a lion in graveyard, caveyard, paveyard. This many a year has Tim been gone, and I thought he were lion in graveyard.' 'My lad,' said Troll, 'this bone I stole, but what he bones that lie in a hole? Thy nuncle was dead as a lump o' lead, afore I found his shin bone, tin bone, thin bone. He can spare a share for a poor old troll, for he don't need his shin bone.' Said Tom, 'I don't see why the likes of thee, without axe and leave, should go making free with the shank or the shin o' my father's kin. So hand the old bone over, rover, trover. Though dead he be, it belongs to he, so hand the old bone over.' 'For a couple of pins,' said Troll and grins, 'I'll eat thee too and gnaw thy shins. A bit of fresh meat will go down sweet. I'll try my teeth on thee now. He now, see now. I'm tired of gnawing old bones and skins. I've mind to dine on thee now.' But just as he thought his dinner was caught, he found his hands had hold of naught. Before he could mind, Tom slipped behind and gave him the boot to warn him, darn him. A bump of the boot on the seat, Tom thought, would be the way to larn him. But harder than stone is the flesh and bone of a troll that sits in the hills alone. As well set your boot to the mountain's root, for the seat of a troll don't feel it, peel it, heal it. Old Troll laughed when he heard Tom groan, and he knew his toes could feel it. Tom's leg is game since home he came, and his bootless foot is lasting lame. But Troll don't care, and he's still there, with the bone he boned from its owner. Donor, boner. Troll's old seat is still the same, and the bone he boned from its owner. "Well, that's a warning to us all," laughed Mary. "It is as well as you used to stick not to... It is as well you used a stick and not your hand, Strider." "Where did you come by that, Sam?" asked Pippin. "I've never heard those words before." Sam muttered something inaudible. "It's out of his own head, of course," said Frodo. "I'm learning a lot about Sam Gamgee on this journey. First, he was a conspirator. Now, he's a jester. He'll end up by becoming a wizard or a warrior." "I hope not," said Sam. "I don't want to be neither." So I am going to show you the picture that we have. Alrighty. And now we're going to continue with the rest of the chapter. In the afternoon, they went on down the wood. They were probably following in the very track that Gandalf, Bilbo, and the dwarves had used many years before. After a few miles, they came out on the top of a high bank above the road. At this point, the road had left the Horwell far behind in its narrow valley, and now clung close to the feet of the hills, rolling and winding eastward among woods and heather-covered slopes toward the ford and the mountains. Not far down the bank, Strider pointed out a stone in the grass. On it, roughly cut and now much weathered, could still be seen dwarf runes and secret marks. "There," said Mary, "that must be the stone that marked the place where the troll's gold was hidden. How much is left of Bilbo's share, I wonder, Frodo?" Frodo looked at the stone and wished that Bilbo had brought home no treasure more perilous nor less easy to part with. "None at all," he said. "Bilbo gave it all away. He told me he did not feel it was really his, as it came from robbers." The road lay quiet under the long shadows of early evening. There was no sign of any other travelers to be seen, as there was now no other possible course for them to take. They climbed down the bank, and turning left went off as fast as they could. Soon a shoulder of the hills cut off the light of the fast westering sun. A cold wind flowed down to meet them from the mountains ahead. They were beginning to look out for a place off the road where they could camp for the night, when they heard a sound that brought sudden fear back into their hearts. The noise of hoofs behind them. They looked back, but they could not see far because of the many windings and rollings of the road. As quickly as they could, they scrambled off the beaten way and up into the deep heather and bilberry brushwood on the slopes above, until they came to a small patch of thick-growing hazels. As they peered out from among the bushes, they could see the road, faint and gray in the failing light, some 30 feet below them. The sound of hoofs drew nearer. They were going fast, with a light clippity-clippity-clip. Then faintly, as if it had blown away from them by the breeze, they seemed to catch a dim ringing as of small bells tinkling. "That does not sound like a black rider's horse," said Frodo, listening intently. The other hobbits agreed hopefully that it did not, but they all remained full of suspicion. They had been in fear of pursuit for so long that any sound from behind seemed ominous and unfriendly. But Strider was now leaning forward, stooped to the ground, with a hand to his ear and a look of joy on his face. The light faded, and the leaves on the bushes rustled softly. Clearer and nearer now the bells jingled, and clippity-clip came the quick-trotting feet. Suddenly, into view below, came a white horse gleaming in the shadows, running swiftly. In the dusk, its headstall flickered and flashed, as if it were studded with gems like living stars. The rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood was thrown back. His golden hair flowed shimmering in the wind of his speed. To Frodo it appeared that the white light was shining through the form and raiment of the rider, as if through a thin veil. Strider sprang from hiding and dashed down toward the road, leaping with a cry through the heather. But even before he had moved or called, the rider had reined in his horse and halted, looking up toward the the thicket where they stood. When he saw Strider, he dismounted and ran to meet him, calling out, Aina vedui Dunadan me govnan. His speech and clear ringing voice left no doubt in their hearts the rider was of the elven folk. No others, and I apologize, I am terrible at trying to pronounce elven, so sorry about that. No others that dwelt in the wide world had voices so fair to hear, but there seemed to be a note of haste or fear in his call, and they saw that he was now speaking quickly and urgently to Strider. Soon Strider beckoned to them, and the hobbits left the bushes and hurried down to the road. This is Glorfindel, who dwells in the house of Elrond, said Strider. Hail, and well met at last, said the elf lord to Frodo. I was sent from Rivendell to look for you. We feared that you were in danger upon the road. Then Gandalf has reached Rivendell? Cried Frodo joyously. No, he had not when I departed, but that was 9 days ago, answered Glorfindel. Elrond received news that troubled him. Some of my kindred, journeying in your land beyond the Baranduin, learned that things were amiss and sent messages as swiftly as they could. They said that the 9 were abroad, and that you were astray, bearing a great burden without guidance, for Gandalf had not returned. There are few, even in Rivendell, that can ride openly against the 9, but such as there were, Elrond sent out north, west, and south. It was thought that you might turn far aside to avoid pursuit, and become lost in the wilderness. It was my lot to take the road, and I came to the bridge of Mithithel, and left a token there, nigh on 7 days ago. 3 of the servants of Sauron were upon the bridge, but they withdrew, and I pursued them westward. I came also upon 2 others, but they turned away southward. Since then I have searched for your trail. 2 days ago I found it and followed it over the bridge, and today I marked where you descended from the hills again. But come, there is no time for further news. Since you are here, we must risk the peril of the road and go. There are 5 behind us, and when you find your trail upon the road, they will ride after us like the wind, and they are not all. Where the other 4 may be, I do not know. I fear that we may find the ford is already held against us. While Glorfindel was speaking, the shades of evening deepened. Frodo felt a great weariness come over him. Ever since the sun began to sink, the mist before his eyes had darkened, and he felt that a shadow was coming between him and the faces of his friends. Now pain assailed him, and he felt cold. He swayed, clutching at Sam's arm. My master is sick and wounded, said Sam angrily. He can't go on riding after nightfall. He needs rest. Glorfindel caught Frodo as he sank to the ground, and taking him gently in his arms, he looked in his face with grave anxiety. Briefly, Strider told of the attack on their camp under Weathertop, and of the deadly knife. He drew out the hilt which he had kept, and handed it to the elf. Glorfindel shuddered as he took it, but he looked intently at it. There are evil things written on this hilt, he said, though maybe your eyes cannot see them. Keep it, Aragorn, till we reach the house of Elrond. But be wary, and handle it as little as you may. Alas, the wounds of this weapon are beyond my skill to heal. I will do what I can, but all the more I do, I urge you now to go on without rest. He searched the wound on Frodo's shoulder with his fingers, and his face grew graver, as if what he learned disquieted him. But Frodo felt the chill lessen in his side and arm. A little warmth crept down from his shoulder to his hand, and the pain grew easier. The dusk of evening seemed to grow lighter about him, as if a cloud had been withdrawn. He saw his friends' faces more clearly again, and a measure of new hope and strength returned. You shall ride my horse, said Glorfindel. I will shorten the stirrups up to the saddle skirts, and you must sit as tight as you can. But you need not fear, my horse will not let any rider fall that I command him to bear. His pace is light and smooth, and if danger presses too near, he will bear you away with a speed that even the black steeds of the enemy cannot rival." "No, he will not," said Frodo. "I shall not ride him, and if I am to be carried off to Rivendell or anywhere else, leaving my friends behind in danger." Glorfindel smiled. "I doubt very much," he said, "if your friends would be in danger if you were not with them. The pursuit would follow you and leave us in peace, I think. It is you, Frodo, and that which you bear that brings us all in peril." To that Frodo had no answer, and he was persuaded to mount Glorfindel's white horse. The pony was laden instead with a great part of the other's burdens, so that they now marched lighter, and for a time made good speed, but the hobbits began to find it hard to keep up with the swift, tireless feet of the elf. On he led them into the mouth of darkness, and still on under the deep clouded night. There was neither star nor moon, not until the grey of dawn did he allow them to halt. Pippin, Merry, and Sam were by that time nearly asleep on the stumbling legs, and even Strider seemed by the sag of his shoulders to be weary. Frodo sat upon the horse in a dark dream. They cast themselves down in the heather a few yards from the roadside and fell asleep immediately. They seemed hardly to have closed their eyes when Glorfindel, who had set himself to watch while they slept, awoke them again. The sun had now climbed far into the morning, and the clouds and mists of the night were gone. "Drink this," said Glorfindel to them, pouring for each in turn a little liquor from his silver-studded flask of leather. It was clear as spring water and had no taste, and it did not feel either cold or warm in the mouth, but strength and vigor seemed to flow into all their limbs as they drank it. Eaten after the draught, the stale bread and dried fruit, which was now all they had left, seemed to satisfy their hunger better than many a good breakfast in the Shire had done. They had rested rather less than 5 hours when they took to the road again. Glorfindel still urged them on, and only allowed 2 brief halts during the day's march. In this way they covered almost 20 miles before nightfall, and came to a point where the road bent right and ran down towards the bottom of the valley, now making straight for the Bruinen. So far there had been no sign or sound of pursuit that the hobbits could see or hear, but often Glorfindel would halt and listen for a moment if they lagged behind, and a look of anxiety clouded his face. Once or twice he spoke to Strider in the elf tongue. But however anxious their guides might be, it was plain that the hobbits could go no further that night. They were stumbling along dizzy with weariness, and unable to think of anything but their feet and legs. Frodo's pain had redoubled, and during the day things about him faded to shadows of ghostly grey. He almost welcomed the coming of night, for then the world seemed less pale and empty. The hobbits were still weary when they set out again early the next morning. There were many miles yet to go between them and the ford, and they hobbled forward at the best pace they could manage. "Our peril will be greatest just ere we reach the river," said Glorfindel, "for my heart warns me that the pursuit is now swift behind us, and other danger may be waiting by the ford." The road was still running steadily downhill, and there was now, in places, much grass at either side, in which the hobbits walked when they could, to ease their tired feet. In the late afternoon they came to a place where the road went suddenly under the dark shadow of the tall pine trees, and then plunged into a deep cutting with steep, moist walls of red stone. Echoes ran along as they hurried forward, and there seemed to be a sound of many footfalls following their own. All at once, as if through a gate of light, the road ran out again from the end of the tunnel into the open. There, at the bottom of a sharp incline, they saw before them a long, flat mile. And beyond that, the ford of Rivendell. On the further side was a steep brown bank threaded by a winding path, and behind that the tall mountains climbed shoulder above shoulder and peak above peak into the fading sky. There was still an echo as of following feet in the cutting behind them, a rushing noise as if a wind were rising and pouring through the branches of the pines. One moment Glorfindel turned and listened. Then he sprang forward with a loud cry. "Fly!" he called. "Fly! The enemy is upon us!" The white horse leapt forward. The hobbits ran down the slope. Glorfindel and Strider followed as rear guard. They were only halfway across the flat when suddenly there was a noise of horses galloping. Out of the gate in the trees that they had just left rode a black rider. He reined his horse in and halted, swaying in his saddle. Another followed him, and then another. Then again 2 more. "Ride forward, ride!" cried Glorfindel to Frodo. He did not obey at once, for a strange reluctance seized him. Checking the horse to a walk, he turned and looked back. The riders seemed to sit upon their great steeds, like threatening statues upon a hill dark and solid, while all the woods and land about them receded as if into a mist. Suddenly he knew in his heart that they were silently commanding him to wait. Then at once fear and hatred awoke in him. His hand left the bridle and gripped the hilt of his sword, and with a red flash he drew it. Ride on, cried Glorfindel, and then, loud and clear, he called to the horse in the elfin tongue, Norolin, Norolin, Ashfaloth, whatever. At once the white horse sprang away and sped like the wind along the last lap of the road. At the same moment the black horses leapt down the hill in pursuit, and from the riders came a terrible cry, such as Frodo had heard, filling the woods with horror in the East Farthing far away. It was answered, and to the dismay of Frodo and his friends, out from the trees and rocks away on the left four other riders came flying. So that's 5 plus 4. 2 rode toward Frodo. 2 galloped madly toward the ford to cut off his escape. They seemed to him to run like the wind and to grow swiftly larger and darker as their courses converged with his. Frodo looked back for a moment over his shoulder. He could no longer see his friends. The riders behind were falling back. Even their great steeds were no match in speed for the white elf horse of Glorfindel. He looked forward again, and hope faded. There seemed no chance of reaching the ford before he was cut off by the others that had lain in ambush. He could see them clearly now. They appeared to have cast aside their hoods and black cloaks, and they were robed in white and gray. Swords were naked in their pale hands. Helms were on their heads. Their cold eyes glittered, and they called to him with fell voices. Fear now filled all Frodo's mind. He thought no longer of his sword. No cry came from him. He shut his eyes and clung to the horse's mane. The wind rustled in his ears, and the bells upon the harness rang wild and shrill. A breath of deathly cold pierced him like a spear, as with a last spurt, like a flash of white fire. The elf horse, speeding as if on wings, passed right before the face of the foremost rider. Frodo heard the splash of water. It foamed about his feet. He felt the quick heave and surge as the horse left the river and struggled up the stormy path. He was climbing the steep bank. He was across the ford, but the pursuers were close behind. At the top of the bank the horse halted and turned about, neighing fiercely. There were 9 riders at the water's edge below, and Frodo's spirit quailed before the threat of their uplifted faces. He knew of nothing that would prevent them from crossing as easily as he had done, and he felt that it was useless to try to escape over the long, uncertain path from the ford to the edge of Rivendell, if once the riders crossed. In any case, he felt that he was commanded urgently to halt. Hatred again stirred in him, but he had no longer the strength to refuse. Suddenly, the foremost rider spurred his horse forward. It checked at the water and reared up. With a great effort, Frodo sat upright and brandished his sword. "Go back," he cried. "Go back to the land of Mordor, and follow me no more." His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. "Come back," they called. "Come back. To Mordor we will take you." "Go back," he whispered. The ring, they cried with deadly voices, and immediately their leader urged his horse forward into the water, followed closely by 2 others. "By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair," said Frodo with a last effort, lifting up his sword, "you shall have neither the ring nor me." Then the leader, who was now half across the ford, stood up menacing in his stirrups and raised up his hand. Frodo was stricken dumb. He felt his tongue cleave to his mouth and his heart laboring. His sword broke and fell out of his shaking hand. The elf horse reared and snorted. The foremost of the black horses had almost set foot upon the shore. At that moment there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along its course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. The 3 riders that were still in the midst of the ford were overwhelmed. They disappeared, burst suddenly under angry foam. Those that were behind drew back in dismay. With his last failing senses, Frodo heard cries, and it seemed to him that he saw beyond the riders that hesitated on the shore a shining figure of white light, and behind it ran small shadowy forms, waving flames that flared red in the grey mist that was falling over the world. The black horses were filled with madness, and leaping forward in terror, they bore their riders into the rushing flood. Their piercing cries were drowned in the roaring of the river as it carried them away. Then Frodo felt himself falling, and the roaring and confusion seemed to rise and engulf him together with his enemies. He heard and saw no more. That is the end of Book 1, and we will continue with Book 2 on probably Sunday, and the first chapter of Book 2 is called Many Meetings, and the first word is Frodo. So I hope that you are immensely enjoying the story. I think I lost my bookmark. Is this my bookmark? This is my bookmark. Okay. I hope that you're enjoying your story, and we will continue with this on Sunday. I have to take a little trip, and I will be back. So, God bless you. I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you on Sunday. Bye.